Hi everyone, and welcome to the Safety Artisan, where you will find professional, pragmatic, and impartial instruction on safety, which we hope you enjoy. So today we're talking about Work Health and Safety Act in Australia, which is surprisingly relevant to what we do. And in fact, let's see how surprisingly relevant it is. Here we go. So we're going to look at the Work Health and Safety Act and its relevance to what we're talking about here on the Safety Artisan. And it's important to answer that question first, the so what test. Many people think that the WHS Act is only applicable to safety in a workplace. So they see it as purely an occupational health and safety piece of legislation. And it isn't. It does do that, but it does so much more as well. And in this short presentation, I'm going to show you why the WHS Act is relevant to system safety, functional safety, design safety, whatever we want to call it. So moving on. Now, I'm actually looking up some information on the Work Health and Safety Act from the Federal Register of Legislation, and in blue letters. And if we go down to the bottom left-hand side of the screen, we will see a little map of Australia with a big red tick on it. And in green, it says in force latest version. So I looked at the website today, 6th of October, and this is the latest version. So just to make sure that we've got the right version. And in Australia, the jurisdiction of which version of the Act is in place is complex. I'm not going to talk about that in the short session, but I will in the full video later on. So, the primary duty of care under the WHS Act is as follows. So, a person conducting a business or undertaking, and person conducting a business or undertaking is usually abbreviated to PCBU. Horrible, clunky term. What it's trying to say is whether you're doing a business or it's non-profit, whether you work for the government, or even if you're self-employed, whoever you are and whatever you do, if it's to do with work and being paid for work, then this applies to you. So, primarily, those people doing this stuff are responsible for ensuring the health and safety of workers who have been engaged or paid by the person, by the PCBU, workers whose activities are influenced or directed by the PCBU while they're at work. And also the PCBU has got to ensure the health and safety of other people. So in the vicinity of the workplace, let's say, or maybe visitors. And as always, the caveat on this ensuring health and safety is so far as is reasonably practicable. And again, we're not going to be talking about so far as is reasonably practicable or SFARP in this session. We'll talk about it in the longer session. And in fact, I think I'm probably going to do a session just on how to do SFARP practically, because a lot of people get it wrong. And it's quite a different concept if you're not used to it. So moving on, look, we've jumped from section 19 to section 22, and we're now talking about the duties of designers. Well, this doesn't sound like occupational health and safety, does it? So we look at the duties of persons, PCBUs, who design plant substances or structures. Okay, now so we're talking industrial plant. We're not talking about commercial goods. There are other acts that apply to stuff that you would buy in a shop. So this is industrial plant, chemical substances and the like, or structures, and those might be buildings or they might be ships, floating platforms, whatever they might be, aircraft, cars, doesn't matter. And so here we have the first duty of a designer, and there are three groups of duties. So first of all, the designer has to ensure the health and safety of people in a workplace. So if they're designing a plant, if they're designing or creating a substance or a structure that is to be used or might reasonably expected to be used at a workplace, then this duty applies to them. So they've got to do whatever it takes to ensure health and safety so far as is reasonably practicable, as we will see. Now, carrying on from that, we get a bit more detail. So the designer has got to ensure, so far as is reasonably practicable, that the plant, substance, or structure is designed to be without risks. Now, so the risks are to the health and safety of persons who are at a workplace, who might use it for the purpose for which it was designed, who might handle the substance, who might store the plant or substance, who might construct the structure, or, and here's the catch-all, who might carry out any reasonably foreseeable activity at a workplace in relation to this plant, substance or structure. And then if we're now on to part E brackets I, and we now get a long list of stuff. Any reasonable foreseeable activity includes manufacture, assembly, use, proper storage, decommissioning, dismantling, disposal, etc. We run out of space there. But the bottom line is that the scope of this act is cradle to grave. So from the very first time that we design a plant, substance, or structure, right through to final disposal of said plant, substance, and structure, the designer has safety responsibilities, thinking about the whole life cycle of the stuff, whatever it is. And now we move on to the other two duties that a designer has. So in subsection 3, the designer has a duty to carry out testing, or that's what it says in the guide. Actually, if you look at the words in the Act, it says the designer must carry out or arrange for calculations, analysis, testing, or examination, whatever's necessary for the performance of the duty that we've just described in subsection 2. So you recall subsection 2, cradle to grave, from creation to final disposal, whatever calculations, analysis, testing, or examination might be needed, the designer's got to carry that out or arrange it in order to ensure safety so far. And then our final duty is, having done all of that work, having designed the stuff to be safe and done all the calculations and testing, the designer must give adequate information to each person who's provided with the design. And the purpose of doing so, we're not just providing information for the sake of it, or because we felt like it. It's provided for a specific purpose. So each purpose for which the plant's substance or structure was designed, so we need all the information associated with its design purpose. We've got to provide those results of those calculations, analysis, testing, and examination. And probably this is also equally crucial from a hazard analysis point of view, any conditions necessary to ensure that the plant, substance, or structure is without risks to health and safety when it's used for the purpose for which it was designed, or all the other stuff if we go back to section 2. So section 4 does actually say this applies to section 2 brackets, A to E, but we ran out of space on the page. So the designer's got to provide basically all the information necessary for people to use the stuff and for the life cycle of whatever it is from cradle to grave. Now, if we look at 4A, B, and C, what we can see is, well, that's the kind of information we generate from hazard analysis, from safety analysis. So, yeah, absolutely, we need system safety in order to meet these duties, to satisfy these duties. And these duties are not just on designers, because the WHS Act is actually very, very clever, because it applies much the same duties, those 3 duties that we heard of, the duty to ensure health and safety, the duty to test and analyse, and the duty to provide information. If we look at sections 22 through 26, we see that very similar duties apply to designers, to manufacturers, to importers, to suppliers, and to those installing, constructing, or commissioning plant substances and structures. And the duties in these sections are all consistent, and basically it recognises that there's a supply chain from designer right through to installation and commissioning, and everybody in that chain has duties to do their part correctly, and also to test what they have to, and to pass on information to the next set of stakeholders. And then in addition to that, if we looked in section 27, we would see that officers of the PCBU, so company directors and the like, people with major influence on who are able to direct operations and that kind of thing. So senior management and directors of companies and the equivalent in the public sector have special requirements applying to them. Again, we're going to talk about that in the main video, not in this. And then workers have duties to comply with reasonable instructions that are intended to keep them safe and other workers safe. So there, if we go into section 28, you get the kind of thing that you would expect to see in workplace health and safety. So that's it in the short video. Just to mention that I've shown you information from the Federal Register of Legislation. I'm entitled to do that under the Creative Commons license, and I'm making the required attribution statement you can see in the middle of the screen. And for the full information on these terms on copyright and attribution, please go to that page on my website, www.safetyartisan.com, and you will find full details of the terms and conditions under which this video is created. And if you want to see the full version of Introduction to the WHS Act, which is going to cover a lot more ground than this, then please go to the Safety Artisan page on www.patreon.com. So that's the end of a presentation, and it just remains for me to say thanks very much for listening, and I look forward to meeting you again. Cheers now. Bye-bye.